Good evening, everyone. It's 7:31 on the 23rd of February 2022, and we are in work session. We have a very packed and exciting agenda tonight. Looking forward to hearing from the different folks in our gallery, and we can do the pledge and start the meeting. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome all. Anybody have any announcements before I turn it over to Village Manager Diatori for the meeting? And let's get started.
Good evening, everybody. We have a late addition to our agenda, but first up we have Kathy Hallis, who's the Executive Director of the Child Care Council of Westchester, and James Ostrowski. I'm sure I messed that up, but I was practicing. Who is Legislative Director for Senator Jabari Brisport. They're here to talk to us tonight about budget request that the senator has made for a $5 billion commitment to childcare to address childcare needs in New York State. So with that, I will turn it over to Kathy and James.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving us some time tonight on what I'm sure is a very busy evening for you. And I'm going to try to provide a little context, and then we'll have James get into some specifics about the resolution. So yes, I'm Kathy Hallis, Executive Director of the Child Care Council. I think I'm in my 19th year or so. So I have certainly been around when it comes to childcare. I want to start off by saying that Senator Brisport has been leading the charge, along with Assembly Member Andy Hevesi, on really building a strong childcare system in our state, because we don't currently have a strong childcare system in our state. As a matter of fact, it probably doesn't really exist anywhere in the United States. So just to give you some context, the United States lags almost every other developed country with which we compete on the world stage when it comes to the amount of public investment we make in childcare and early learning. And as a result, the percentage of women in our workforce has really plummeted. And once again, we lag our competitor nations in that regard. And COVID made it all worse. Just before the pandemic, S&P Global released a report documenting the negative impacts on the US economy because we have made it difficult, again, particularly for women, to be part of the workforce. And the two primary reasons for that phenomenon are inability to access childcare and the fact that the country does not have a universal paid family leave policy. So I'm sure you all know that employers of every sector are struggling to find workers, and the workers are struggling to find and or pay for childcare. In Westchester, childcare is usually the biggest bill in a household. Center-based care for an infant averages over $21,000, and childcare staff wages are lower than 98% of all other occupations, which I frankly found shocking. And I learned recently that 60% of the New York State childcare workforce receive public benefits. So our childcare system at present is not really working. And Senator Brisport, who spent months, frankly, earlier in 2021, touring the state, visiting childcare programs and providers, talking to parents, talking to employers, has proposed legislation to really start to build the kind of system that we need, and is calling for a $5 billion investment to get that, again, the system that we really need underway. So as mentioned before, James is here with us tonight. He is Council and Legislative Director for the Senator. And James, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sure, thanks, Kathy. Thanks for having us here and for considering the resolution. As Kathy said, we did an 11-week tour across New York State, and the issues that Kathy mentioned, they're present everywhere across the state. One thing that stuck out from our visit to Westchester was, in Westchester, a family of 4, where 2 parents each work 40 hours per week for minimum wage for $14 per hour. They will not qualify right now for childcare subsidies, and center-based care would cost 55.4% of their income. And that's a really shocking number. And it's something that's, experienced all across the state. It's Buffalo, Rochester, Long Island, New York City. It's everywhere. I won't belabor the point about how bad the system is right now. It's also particularly bad that, this past year, we've been really hoping that the federal government would come back through with Build Back Better funding, and they really have not. And that it doesn't look like it's exactly on the horizon right now. So what we're trying to do this year is to get New York State to put forward about low single-digit billions, 5 billion we're thinking, to increase the eligibility for childcare subsidies, pay childcare workers and providers a livable wage so that they could live a dignified life. Right now, childcare workers are fleeing to work at Dunkin' Donuts is a story that we heard pretty frequently. Not to say that working at Dunkin' Donuts is not dignified, but it's hard to retain staff is the main point. And if New York puts forward an investment in this, it'll have add-on benefits. There's research that for every $1 you spend in the childcare sector, you get $1.85 in benefits. So this is something that we think we can't afford not to do. We don't want to be burdening the counties and the localities with this. That's something that's been very important for us. And it's a matter of New York State picking up the tab for some of this. There is some federal funding that's left over that can be recycled, but New York State, we're in a good position. The governor has made favorable comments on fully funding childcare. She was a part of this childcare availability task force just a couple of years ago. The majority leader of the Senate from Westchester has made this a key issue, and we're hoping that towns like Ossining, Albany's going to be voting on a similar resolution tomorrow. We're really hoping that if we could have a strong showing, we could make this kind of investment to get ourselves in a better place for this coming year. So thanks for everyone for listening. Also happy to take any questions that people might have.
Can someone read the resolution, please? I got it in the email, but just since this is being recorded.
Sure, unless someone else has it handy. And I'm not sure if this is the draft that you have in front of yourselves, okay, but from the email, the Universal Child Care Resolution, whereas childcare is a public good, and whereas childcare must be free and accessible by all residing in New York, and whereas families should not have to go through a means testing process to receive childcare, and whereas families should be empowered to choose the childcare program that meets their children's needs, and whereas childcare teachers and providers must be compensated as their peers in public education, therefore be it resolved that the council calls on the state government to invest $5 billion in the childcare sector in the fiscal year 2023 enacted budget to ensure that all families have access to childcare and providers are compensated accordingly. Resolved that the council calls on the state government to create a plan to expand childcare access to everyone who needs it. Resolved that the council supports all efforts to provide universal childcare to all children and families in the state, and be it further resolved that the council will be proactive in its efforts to promote and advocate for universal childcare.
Thank you. Okay, are there questions or comments?
I can chime in. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us, James and Kathy. Absolutely. This is such an important issue. It's something that is really present for me. I have two little ones, one that turned 3 today, and then one that is 8 months old. And so childcare is something that is front of mind for me. I have been following this issue really closely, and so I have a question and a statement. My question is, do you have a sense of, and I couldn't quite tease this out in the language, but for families that choose to have a stay-at-home parent as opposed to sending a child to a childcare facility, do you know if that would also be included in this resolution?
I think it's definitely within the spirit of the resolution. However, it's not a part right now of the Universal Child Care Act and the current set of budget demands. I think that's a great question, and it's a very important issue. And I don't know, Kathy, if you had more that you wanted to add.
Yeah, let me say that the history of most of the funding for childcare was driven really not by the thought that it would be beneficial to children, which it is when it's quality, but it was attached to working. So parents could access it when they were working. I think, particularly since all the research about early brain development has come out, and we know what we know now about how great it is for kids when it's high quality, I see a shift in that, but we're not there yet. There's definitely sentiment among people like myself and other childcare advocates to really think of it not just as something that helps people get to work, which is very important, but just as important, I think, something that gets children off to the best start possible, which pays off. You know, I see you shaking your head. I mean, you already know, right?
Right.
And we should do it for that reason as well. I don't know that that's going to happen right away, but I know that those of us who are working on this do want it to go in that direction. And frankly, we could use your help.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I could, so that was my question. And then my statement is that the resolution kind of talks broadly about this issue, and there's a lot of detail and nuance once you get into the nitty gritty of it. But to get into the weeds for a moment, one particular policy solution that I'm a big advocate of is child development credits. So basically the idea is every family would have $15,000 a year per child to be able to use for childcare. They could use that for a childcare center, or they could use that for staying at home. And the reason that I'm an advocate for this is not only because right now we have a paucity of options for childcare. And so just saying, okay, we're going to make it universal. Really high quality options like we have the Ossining Children's Center and others here in Ossining don't exist everywhere. And so in order to account for rural communities or communities that have very few options, still having the resources for parents that want to keep their children at home, I think would be great. So thank you for coming. Thank you for continuing the fight. You have a huge advocate in me.
Well, I hope I can perhaps follow up and have some additional conversation with you. And James mentioned earlier the Build Back Better bill. It has been very disappointing, obviously, to see that stall, because certainly I think the language in that bill really reflected the importance of a variety of options for parents at almost every income level. And I'm still hopeful at some point we'll see some version of that come forward. So thank you.
So thank you for being here. I am will happily add my name. I would also echo Trustee Lopez's sentiments. I have spent really my entire adult life working and raising two kids while my husband and I both worked and tried to do volunteer work, which becomes very difficult. I've always talked about how difficult it is to have a full-time job and run for mayor and be a mayor, for example, for people who also have to take care of their children, where, you know, the care and the focus on the infrastructure for daycare centers and all of those facilities in of themselves take on a life of their own. So I do like Trustee Lopez's comments about, you know, the option, which I think some European countries do, not many, but some, both in quality and quantity, and the ability also for in-home care to have intergenerational families, where so many children get raised by grandparents, which is, I think, left out too often in the conversation. And that is different across the country and across cultures and immigration cycles. Regardless, it's actually in some circles believed to be the healthiest way to raise children is to have family members do it. But they do need the financial support. I'm actually taken aback by the dollar amount we're discussing, finding it difficult to sort of grapple with why it's such a small amount. Given what we spend on infrastructure, the conversations, endless conversations about security, whatever they're planning to put, I guess in my lifetime, I doubt it, in the subway system so that we don't have trash and a person. And then you think, and we're talking about 10 billion is the starting price for that. To think that you would spend 10 billion on a test over and spend 5 billion on children. And I think, to your point, it's a very interesting point. I think parents think of the quality care for their children, but the approach is actually about the workforce.
Yes.
And to that extent, I often wonder why you don't take the top 50 employers in the United States by valuation, Apple being the number one, Coca-Cola used to be, and don't require 1% equity from their firm, which frankly, if you took the top 10 would pay for all of this, because it is their workforce that gets supported. You know, so as companies make more and more money, and good for them, and they employ lots of people, it is those employees that would benefit. And instead of infrastructure, if they just took 1%, I guess if they took half of 1% on an annualized basis based on their equity valuation, a very simple index, doesn't matter if they're located or headquartered in the state of New York, if they do business in the state of New York, or in the United States. So I think there's such simple formulas. I'm sort of upset by the low number we're discussing. So I'm happy to add my name. It just feels like 5 billion. What do we have? 20 million people in New York. So pretty steadily now for a couple of decades. It goes up and goes down a little bit, but it's with a huge workforce and industry in downstate New York, with a city like New York, and then in upstate where we're trying to build things up in some very rural areas, as Trustee Lopez said. Sort of astounded that we're talking about 5 billion, to be honest. I mean, I'm happy to sign, you know, like done, add my name. I just feel like I'm disappointed that that's what we're talking about. As a taxpayer, I'm disappointed. And it doesn't matter that I have grown children. It's irrelevant. I work in a community center with 150 children under the age of 5, and those caretakers and educators, it's a struggle. And it's a struggle for the parents. And I was hoping by now things would be a little better. So I'm grateful that you're here. This is not a criticism of you, I'm just giving some ideas. And if there's something that I could also be part of, you know, I'd love to be. I think this is probably arguably one of the most important issues we have going on.
Well, you know what, Mayor, when you first said something about the number, I was waiting for you to say 5 billion. Oh my God, how could you ask for so much?
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, you know, historically we have asked, I think, for less, and we've gotten, you know, very little. So kudos to you. Thank you. I almost have tears in my eyes, and I definitely want to follow up and have an additional conversation with you, because your thinking is just wonderful. And I think the kind of boldness that we need. So James, do you want to jump in here?
Sure, and definitely really appreciate those comments and concerns, Mayor. And we are asking for $5 billion in the first year. The plan is overall the Empire State Campaign for Childcare. The plan is to move towards a universal system in a period of 4 years. And for some of the reasons that were also discussed earlier, even if it is available to everyone, not everyone will want to, the take-up rate is going to be certainly less than 100%, which is kind of getting at the question of why the numbers are not higher than they are. And I think that the Child Care Availability Task Force, based on looking at different models elsewhere, found that a lot of people like to just stay home with their children, and for the reasons that Treasurer Lopez mentioned, that's something that we should support. That's also something that Build Back Better had some provisions about paid parental leave, which is important and which we support as kind of a yes and strategy. But yeah, we're definitely with you. And also, the infrastructure is not currently there right now. Even if we wanted to have everyone covered within the next 6 months, the workforce is really suffering. We lost, I think, about 2,000 providers since the COVID-19 pandemic started. So in order to stabilize and build out that infrastructure, I agree, we'd love to spend 20 billion this year and just really snap our fingers and make it, but we're trying to do this in a way that over 4 years gets us to that goal.
I don't want to have, I could talk about this for hours. I don't want to. I will share with you that because I work in this environment on an everyday basis and have for probably about 9 or 10 years, the people who are educators are oftentimes women, and the people that we lost were people who had young children at home. And so they couldn't take care of other kids and be educators because they didn't have care for their own children, or it cost them more to have care for their children than they were making. And then the pandemic just slammed that home. Like it was just so abundantly clear. And as an employer, there was absolutely nothing we can do. We had even thought about opening a little daycare center for employees' little children, but we then have to hire daycare people to take care of those. I mean, it just simply wasn't possible. So on a very personal level, and something that I see in my own work life and have seen and continue to see, it isn't enough to simply raise salaries, by the way. That's because it's also the people who do this for a living. There needs to be some more studies about what they need, because if they had the ability to get coupons and free childcare for their own children, we would solve a lot of the problems. And so it's the circular kind of issue, and infrastructure alone is not solving. Building and building and building doesn't actually and that speaks, I think, to Trustee Lopez's comment. And I'm sort of going to stop there. Don't even let me say one more word about this topic, because we do have a very deep agenda here. And I usually give everybody an opportunity if they want to comment, but I do want to thank you for enlightening us and being here with us for this evening. Does there any other comments from my fellow trustees or anybody else that would like to comment?
I may, Mayor. Thank you for coming in. This is very helpful. I'm going to echo pretty much everything that Mayor said and Trustee Lopez said. Now that I'm going through my taxes and preparing my taxes, one of the biggest challenge is obviously people who lost their jobs, people who decided to one of the parents actually take care of their kids, and there's not enough money in there to make a balanced budget. That's what you have to look at it. So I wish it would be more money, but I do appreciate everything that you guys doing. So this is more like we have support legislation like this in the past, and 150% in favor of supporting this as well. So thank you so much for that.
All
Thank
right.
you. Thank you. We're very grateful. And frankly, I'm overwhelmed. Thank you very much.
I'm not seeing any other hands. Am I missing anybody that has something to add? I'm not seeing. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, James. Thank you for being here. If there's follow-ups, you know how to reach us. And thank you, Karen, for bringing this important issue to our agenda. We'll pass on the resolution as we do. And you are welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. I say this to all our visitors. Most people, as exciting as we think our meetings are, oftentimes tell us that they have other plans for the evening. But thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Manager?
You, Mayor, thank you. Next, we have, I'd like to introduce, we have two presentations tonight from our committees, one from the Zoning Board of Appeals and one from the Planning Board and Board of Architectural Review. But first up, I'd like to introduce Marlene Cheatham, who is Chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals, to give you a brief overview of the Zoning Board and what they do and how they operate.
Good evening, everyone. As noted, I am Marlene Cheatham, and I have sat in the trustee seat where some of you have sat. I've actually sat in the mayor seat where the mayor is sitting currently, so I understand exactly what you're going through on a weekly basis. But I do want to come from the point of the Zoning Board of Appeals. The Zoning Board of Appeals consists of a 5-member board and 2 alternate members. But currently we have only one alternate on the board. So there's actually room for one more alternate. And I'm going to put the manager on the spot by saying, if there is anyone out there listening to this who is interested, please send your resume to the village manager. And now that I have given that opening pitch, let me tell you a little bit more about the zoning board and what we've done in the past year. 2021, I don't know if there's a screen that you wanted to share. I think everyone got.
Yeah, Marlene, I thought you had a presentation. Did you want that? There you go.
There it is. Okay. Through 2021, I don't know, Jaime, if you want to go through the next slide. We reviewed 66 area variances. We reviewed 66 applications. 51 area variance applications, 41 of them were approved, 1 was denied, 3 were withdrawn, and 6 were pending or are still waiting for information or movement on the part of the applicant. In addition to area variances, we also do use variances, and we had 8 use variance applications in 2020, 2021. 3 were approved, 3 were denied, 2 were withdrawn and or on hold at this time. We also do some interpretations, and though most of the board work is area variance and use variance, we were asked to provide 3 interpretations of the zoning law, and we also granted 4 extensions to ongoing variances previously granted. Now, I said all that to say, with all that being said, let me tell you the basics of the Zoning Board of Appeals. So I'm going to not say that every time, so I'll just shorten it by saying the ZBA. The ZBA is both an administrative and quasi-judicial body that does not have the legislative or policy-making powers, but the responsibilities are to consider the appeals or decisions of the building or code enforcement officers and or inspectors. The ZBA acts as the interpreter of the local zoning laws that are set by the Village Board of Trustees. Let me say that again, just in case you missed it. The ZBA acts as the interpreter of the local zoning laws set by the Village Board of Trustees. Now, I don't know if you heard that, but let me say it one more time. the ZBA acts as the interpreter of the local zoning laws set by the Village Board of Trustees. I want to stress that the ZBA only works within the zoning laws set by the board. And as I sat on a New York State Lunch and Learn meeting today for renewable energy, they stated more than once that everything rests on the comprehensive plan, and it is the key to any zoning law changes. So with that case, and that is the case for any of the land use boards, we all work within the confines of the comprehensive plan. To be clear, the authority of the ZBA is mandated either by state statute or by the Board of Trustees. For those interested in looking up the codes, they are found under New York State Law Section 7-712 and the Ossining Village Code under Section 270-48. But we are looking for at applications because they are outside of the zoning codes for a particular area. Now, for the frustrated members of the public that have come to the ZBA, you are asking, why do we have a ZBA? Well, that's easy. Every community has a zoning ordinance, and therefore they have a ZBA to hear appeals to provide flexibility in the application of zoning laws under appropriate circumstances. Contrary to popular belief, all property in the same district in the village is under the same rules. But to be real, all property is different and zoning laws may not work for every property in every situation. I want to stop and put a plug here to say the Board of Trustees, to the Board of Trustees, there comes a point in the discussions that we need to take a look at certain portions of the village and decide if the current zoning laws make sense to fit the majority of the properties or should be adjusted to limit the number of repeat cases that end up before the land use boards. So now I'm going to step off of my soapbox and talk about the specific responsibilities of the ZBA. First, let's talk about the area variances. As noted in the statistics I gave at the beginning of the presentation, we have a lot of area variances that come before the ZBA. Ossining was built in sections that seemed to put a house on a lot that was not meant to have porches or side yards. In any application or case, the authorization by the zoning board is to determine whether to grant a variance by the use of a balancing test. The balancing test is a test to weigh the benefit to the applicant against the detriment of the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood or community. So contrary to what you may think, it is not based on friendship or likability of the applicant. It is based on 5 statutory factors. 1, whether an undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood or a detriment to nearby properties will be created by granting of the area variance. 2, whether the benefits sought by the applicant can be achieved by some method feasible to the applicant to pursue other than the area variance. 3, whether the required variance is substantial. 4, whether the proposed variance will have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood. And 5, whether the alleged difficulty was self-created. Now, New York state law provides for this factor that the consideration is relevant to the decision, but is not determinative. So it is not necessarily one that will preclude the granting of the area variance. And with that being said, all 5 of these factors are addressed at every single area meeting for every single area variance. And it is at that point, the board can either grant or deny an area variance based on the application and the ability to meet the factors. So the ZBA is responsible not only for area variances, but also use variances, and they're to hear all the use variance cases. I know there's a lot of legalese on this PowerPoint before you, but the long and short of it is that the ZBA is the authoritative body that hears appeals for the use of land for the purpose which is otherwise not allowed or prohibited by the applicable zoning regulations. So unlike the use variance, the area variance is a little tougher, The applicant must demonstrate an unnecessary hardship for each and every permitted use under the current zoning regulation for the district where the property is located. They must meet all of the following 4 factors. The applicant cannot realize a reasonable rate of return provided that lack of return is substantial as demonstrated by competent financial evidence. 2, the alleged hardship relating to the property in question is unique and does not apply to a substantial portion of the district or neighborhood. 3, the requested use variance, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. And 4, the alleged hardship was not self-created. But in this case, all 4 factors of the use variance must be met, including the factor that the hardship was not self-created. So as we look at all of this, whenever we meet, again, I started off saying that we were quasi judicial. We meet looking at this in the terms of the law and what's before us. And I know that it's important for me at this point, as I start to wrap it up, that it's important to clarify some of the issues that seem to come up time to time for all the land use boards, but especially sometimes with the zoning board. So I just want to give you a few of our additional guidelines. The zoning board in granting an area variance must grant the necessary minimum variance that is deemed necessary and adequate, but at the same time preserve and protect the character of the neighborhood and the health, safety, and welfare of the community. So when we look at it, you know, though people don't always see it, but we try to do what the minimum that we can grant, or the minimum that we're looking at for it with each variance that is before us. The ZBA is granting use variances, shall grant the minimum variance that it deems necessary. Oops, did I do the same thing? And adequate to address the unnecessary hardship proven by the applicant, and at the same time preserve and protect the character of the neighborhood and the health, safety, and welfare of the community. The needs or desires of a particular owner or tenant or a particular prospective owner or tenant does not, either alone or in conjunction with other factors, afford any basis for the granting of a variance. And so, you know, when we talk about a hardship, we're talking about that, you know, it's not always the hardship that we're looking at, but it is something that it's not just the hardship of the owner or the person that we base things on. So that's important. People tend to take that sometimes and run with it. So so for the granting of a variance, the fact that the improvements already existing at the time of the application are old, obsolete, outdated, or in disrepair, or the fact that the property is then unimproved shall not be deemed to make the plight of the property unique or to contribute thereto. And where said board, or where the zoning board finds the zoning classifications of a particular property to be conducive to the deprivation of the reasonable use of the land or buildings, and where the board finds the same condition to apply generally to other land or buildings in the same neighborhood or zoning district, the board shall call this condition to the attention of the village board. So when things are found and they're in over and over again, it should come to the attention of the village board. In all cases where the zoning board of appeals grants a variance from the strict application of the requirements of this chapter, it shall be the duty of such board to attach such conditions and safeguards as may be required in order that the result of its action may be as nearly as possible in accordance with the spirit and intent of the law that is set before us in the chapter. So the zoning board has its own, you know, has lives within the confines of the law, not only New York State, but also the Village of Ossining Charter and the laws therein. So I know that there are probably questions. Hopefully, if I can't answer them, everybody else will jump in. But I think I can answer most of them. So are there any questions from the board?
I can start. Welcome, Marlene. Happy to have you in our virtual space. One of the things that I know least about is how you all think about parking. It's one of the topics that comes up for us a lot. And I know that there are ways that you think about that issue when it comes up as a topic for folks that come in front of you. So without even to go into specific cases, would just love to hear broadly about the way that you think about parking and variances.
I think that I always think outside of the box. And I think that Ossining is going to have a parking issue, and I don't care where you are, because of Ossining was not built to have cars. Okay, there's no other way around it. There are certain streets that don't have garages, they don't have driveways, they have narrow streets. The houses are abutting each other. There's no place to put a garage. There's no place, there's only on-street parking. Are we creative enough as Ossining to start looking at alternative methods, to look at some of the places where we do have parking and decide if they are, accessible to the public on the off hours? Are we looking at, being creative with people who have large front yards and no backyard space, but can we look at that as a means of parking? I mean, I think that's a discussion that needs to be had at the board level that kind of looks more at the areas that are hardest hit, that have the least amount of parking. I know as a sitting trustee, one of the long-term discussions we had was property owned by New York State that is at the end of a certain street, and we won't name that street, that has a huge frontage, that, we would love to put tandem parking down there, but that was not to be done. But that, can those type of partnerships be made? And I can't say yes or no. I can say that, those are some of the things that we should think about. And yes, every application, well, some of the applications, most of the applications, a lot of the applications that come before us all have a parking issue. They want to build a building and it has so many units and they need so many parking spaces and there's nowhere to put them. That's an issue. And I think that us, as a village and as trustees, it's time to open those discussions as to what we can do to help the situation and not make it worse. We want affordable things. We want things to grow. We want Ossining to grow, but then how do we do it within the confines of what's needed?
That's helpful. Thank you. I have one more question. It's a broad question, and then I'll hand it to my colleagues. And it is that you mentioned how the ZBA is a quasi-judicial body. And so there is no correct or incorrect answer to this question. It's purely interpretation. But I would love to hear what you would describe as the current ZBA's you could think of it as their judicial philosophy. So what would you say are the underlying set of ideas and beliefs that shape the way that you think about particular cases?
I always say that if I were a sitting judge and a case came before me, I have to take each case as it stands. Okay, even though there's laws, even though there's case law, even though there's law that precedes that law, but you still have to take the case in what stands before you. So you take what happened before and you can decide, like this happened in the past, but we also have to take what's before us and then apply those factors to every single case to see where we end up. And you kind of work your way through it and vet your way through it. So just like any legal case, you sit there and you go through it in the confines of the 5 factors or the 4 factors that are set before you. We go through it with the information given to us by the contractors, by our land use attorney, by the people set before us, and the application and the board and the building department. So all of that together kind of gives us the information to discuss it, to vet it out, and to decide whether yes or no, or agree or deny. So it really is a case by case, but the case can be built upon what happened in the past. So again, so every time we make a decision, we also have to think this could affect or have some kind of effect on something coming before us in the future.
That makes sense.
I hope that answers your question.
If I'm interpreting what you're saying correctly, then you're taking each case as it stands with the facts of the case in front of you. The benefit of that is that you hear every case for what it is in front of you. And one could argue that the trade-off is that there's an increased opportunity for bias. The very final kind of follow-up question that I have then is, and again, I have no idea. I've even really watched that many ZBA meetings to really know in detail, but what would you say the ZBA has generally inclination to say yes? Let's try to find a reason to say yes, or an inclination to say no. What would you say?
I would say neither. I said the ZBA has the inclination to look at the case and make a determination as to whether it fits within those factors. That's where we have to stand. It's not a yes when they see a case. It's not a no when we see a case. It is, does this work? So there are times we may bat it back and forth. We have to look at it. It really is, does this fit or does it not fit? Is it with, if we're looking at an area variance, is it a large area variance? Is there something that happens within the, that will disrupt the entire look of the community? Like all of that fits in, and we ask those questions. So it has nothing to do whether, like I said, it has nothing to do whether we like the person, whether we like the contractor, whether we like, the outfit that's bringing it before us. It is taking the case and looking at the merits of the case.
That's all for me. Thank you very much, Marlene.
Thank you, Marlene, and thank you, Omar Lopez. Others, I feel like there will be other questions here. Mr. Fritchie?
Yeah, I don't really have any questions. Good to see you, Marlene. Very nice.
Hello, Bob.
It was nice to learn something on how the zoning board works. But I know exactly where you're coming from. I sat in the seat, not your seat, but I sat on the board, and I agree with everything you say. You work with what's presented in front of you, and that's how you come to your determination. So again, thank you for coming to see us tonight.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I have a question. Hi, Marlene. How are you?
Hey, Miss Dana White.
Thank you for serving as the chair of the ZBA. Just to clarify for our viewing audience, you receive referrals from the planning board normally, right?
No, we
No?
receive
Like how
we
do cases come
receive
to you?
applications that come through the building department. Building department, is that where you work, Jaime? And it depends on the application. It may be on the planning board side, but it may never come to the zoning board. It really is if they're within the project, if there is a within the confines of the area or the property, whether the use of what they're looking for is outside of the zoning code, or whether there's some issue with the property itself where it doesn't fit the zoning code area that, you know, is within our zoning, within the area that it is. So if a piece of property is, you know, needs a 4-foot setback on both sides as a side yard, and they only have 3 or, you know, 2, then they come before us because there's a difference. But we never see all of the properties on the planning board, nor does the planning board always see our applications as well.
Trustee White, the Zoning Board of Appeals by its name hears appeals from determinations made by the building inspector.
Okay, the building
He is-
inspector.
He
Okay.
is the code enforcement officer for the village of Ossining. So if he determines something, he sends what might be called, what we call a referral letter, which essentially indicates that there are reasons why your particular plans are not acceptable. And then the person will go to the Zoning Board of Appeals.
So this might be a matter of, as you said, setbacks, how far back the house, the structure is from the street or the sidewalk, right? It might be the size of a deck it's gonna be too close to a wetlands or something, or, you know, there's such all different types of things, right?
Absolutely.
And that you had mentioned that changing some of the zoning laws or zoning parameters might actually reduce the number of appeals that you get, right? In certain areas.
I say it that way because there are, and I can't even tell you how many, you know, appeals may come from a certain area. And I, you know, I actually had this discussion earlier to sit down and look at how many appeals may come from a certain area that are all the same. Like, you know, knowing that the lot sizes are too small to begin with, knowing that, you know, there is no backyard, knowing that, you know, like it's there already, but our zoning code calls for something that really doesn't exist in the overlay area. So that was a question that I had. And I think but that can't be the zoning board that makes that change. That has to come from the trustees. But it may be something that, you know, we may want to look at as a zoning board or as a group or whatever, to say, hey, does this really make sense to have this when 90% of the houses in this area don't even fit this?
Right. So the zoning laws may not match the kind of old, I mean, our village was laid out a long time ago, before zoning. So just all happened kind of organically. So, well, I know it's not an easy job, and I appreciate that you've taken it on, and we're grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else before I go?
Yes,
Manny,
I'm
is that you unmuted? Great. Hello,
Yes,
Manny.
thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Marlene. We sat on those chairs a long time ago. We sat together. I can go on. I can take over from here and the rest of the night, but I'm not. I'm passionate for planning and zoning. So Seth, you know, be ready at some point. But anyway, I am the liaison for the zoning board. I was the liaison for the planning board last year. So I'm very familiar with what this looks like, of what the planning board, zoning board, they do for us. And I do thank them for all the challenges that you guys go through, the 4-hour meetings, 2-hour meetings, sometimes, you know, work sessions, and then you have regular meetings as well, just like us. So I know I know how difficult it is by seeing through the videos. And I'm not going to say too much on this, but I think this is very helpful. Thank you for staff to putting this together. We haven't done something like this forever. I think is needed for the public to actually, when they watch this, sort of get a little bit of an understanding what the planning board does and what the zoning board does in our community. I do want to ask a question. we don't need to discuss this right now. Think about, one of the things that Marlene, you mentioned is like this, the people who have the power to modify or to adjust or to make new regulations is the VOT. So I'm gonna say this to Seth and you, Marlene. Think about something that you guys are seeing as a common pattern that has been happening a lot. That it happens because they're non-conforming. Sure, there are properties that are in a non-conforming lot. And what does that mean? And what does that look like? So if it's a trend that has been happening, I would like to, at least me personally, I would like to know a little bit more, see if there's something that the board could do, that the board could look into it at some point of time. I have a lot of those, but I would like to hear from the chair of those boards to actually see if we can have some future discussions here on a board level, because there are all neighborhoods, there are all houses and zones that sort of happen. Sure, previous boards make this happen. When they were doing the comp plan many years ago, or they were trying to rezone many years ago, we have commercial zones and residential areas that don't really conform. We're trying to mix them together, but they don't. And when someone's trying to improve their property as on a commercial level, they can, because they're in a non-conforming zone. So what happens? Nothing happens. So I'm going to leave it as that. I do want to thank you for all the work that you guys do. I do appreciate it. Like I said, I can take over the whole meeting. We can have discussions, but I'm not. There's a long agenda. So thank you, Mayor, for allowing me these few minutes. Marlene, thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you. Let's see if I have a little bit of a cold, so sorry about that. Marlene, welcome. Thank you for being here. I'm not going to be redundant. I don't want to repeat. I want to just, I believe in balancing a couple of things that were said. But first, let me thank you for being here. And exactly as Manny had said, I asked that every one of our dozen plus, because we have a new council, present to the board. I think it needs to be on an annual basis so that like chairs don't feel like, oh my God, I have to set up a presentation. It should just be an ongoing every year. Find the time to do a 10-15 minute update from the year before so that there's conversations. So my questions are a little different. Well, let me start with a statement. One of the statements is that it is true that Ossining was not built. I mean, it was built, I think, for horses at one time. It is also so true that we have many neighborhoods that were built as single family homes. They were not designed to have so many people and so many families living in them. And so a constant adjustment based on demographic shift, one could argue you might want to change some of the shifts that are occurring rather than do with infrastructure changes. And I think that, to me, is one of the biggest challenges of this decade and next for zoning and for planning. And so I'm very grateful for the boards, and there's really 4 land use boards. So you're one of 4. You in planning have a real judicial role. The other 2 are advisory. Well, one's a quasi actually, but so I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad we're going to hear from another one tonight. I'm glad that we're going to be able to put together. That brings me to the next piece, which is going forward. Number 1, I would really like to get an assessment. It doesn't have to be here tonight, of what kind of training is necessary based on all that you guys have to do and your volunteers. Many people work full time. Supposed to get together once a month. I'm going to guess that you meet more than once a month, because there's the pre, there's the post, there's the continuation, there's the complaints, there is the whatever that goes on. And people don't realize how much work actually. It's not just those 2 hours you're spending. And I'm sure sometimes 1, 2 hours. I know I'm being kind, like really late meetings. But I think I would be interested in, what do you need from the board as far as like training, so that people are well trained, and so that new people are encouraged to come on and not feel they have to spend 3 years before they know what they're doing, because we can't pay for law degrees for everybody, right? And you don't want to be totally dependent on lawyers and staff. You want individuals who are members of the community to have a balance of what they need, the tools. So that's where BOT can help as well when we do our budgets, etc. So it could be an email.
Well,
what do you need from us? Is really
Well, I could
one
tell
of
you
the
that
items.
we could, and I'm sure Seth does this in the planning board. I know the zoning board. We take advantage of most of the free training that's out there. New York State has enough web training to last a lifetime
Okay.
that we can, and the Westchester Planning Federation has training that I was actually on one of theirs today. So we take advantage of all of the training that comes before us, or we try to get the boards to. We're mandated to do, and I'm going to get this wrong, but I think it's 30 hours of training a year. Nod if I'm right, someone. Oh,
He's
4
got four. Is that
hours?
40?
4 hours?
It's 4 hours every year. Yeah.
4 hours.
Okay, okay. I think I do 104 because I swear I'm on everything that comes by, but but we do try to do the 4 hours of training every year, which is, and again, New York State has it on their web. You can actually just go on and refresh yourself, check out what's there. We do get, the Westchester Planning Federation that sends out their information, and it's just we try to take care of the free stuff before we have to go to the paid stuff. So but if you're telling us you're going to send us to Hawaii to go for training, I'm sure Seth and the entire we can get the planning board, the zoning board, and the other land use boards to jump on board, and we'll be off and flying. So but we do try to do the free stuff first, Rika.
No, my
I'm
question
gonna
is,
come
how can
too,
we help?
Maureen. I'm coming too. Coming.
Okay.
Oh, you're going to Hawaii? Great. I'm serious about if there's something that you need from us, whether you do it now or you do it before the budgets. I encourage you to inform us. There might be some new people say, listen, I can't get on these things. I've heard that there's something, but whatever. I mean, I would like to hear personally, like what it is that the board can do to make things better, smoother, more efficient. The next future thing of how things can work better. When I was in EAC, the chair there often said that I wish that the chairs of the land use boards would get together once in a while so that we can learn from each other, see what's going on. I'm not sure that actually happens. Your point of view on something like that, please.
And I don't know if Seth would agree with me, but I would really like a land use administrative board where the chairs sit together and just discuss, like, among ourselves, like some things that almost like, can we have an administrative council? Like, there's some things that come before the board that I think administratively we could be able to sign off on versus having to come before the whole board. But I don't know if that's going to ever happen. Or we can discuss some of the issues before all four of the boards, that we could come together and say, hey, I don't know where you are on this, or how far away, like what are your plans? What are you thinking? Like, we kind of work in a silo, and I'm not so sure that's always healthy with each of the applications. Maybe it is, maybe we have to. I don't know what, land use council or steward would say, but I think sometimes just hearing what the other boards are thinking or where they're going may help some of us make decisions within our own pieces of the pie.
So you never get to see the whole pie is
No.
the issue. And I saw that from the EAC to historic. I can't remember if a case went in front of zoning or planning. It just felt that the lawyer each time would say, well, the other folks said yes. And you don't know. It might be true, it may not. It's, the board said yes. I never know which board. It seemed like that was such a potential for a gap after so much hard work is poured into cases. So I'm going to put that sort of as something to think about as we also listen to planning and listen to historic, like just to hear if there is a way, even if it's not to discuss cases, but discuss a more efficient way to move things along on behalf of the community. Because at the end of the day, that's what you guys are all doing. You're not free labor, you're members of the community who are looking at things from a point of view of the betterment of the community. And that's why it's the appeals. That's your whole first 2 pages of your presentation. And I did hear the 3 repetitive piece. I heard it loud and clear. So those were and it goes without saying that we appreciate your work as a chair, as we do with all the chairs who of course put in even more time than the members. And I did want to point out, just for the record, that there are 2 boards that are not appointed by the Board of Trustees. You're one of those boards appointed by the manager, as in the Village of Ossining. That is how that works. And you are not the towns, that the town and village do not work as one, because some people sometimes think that they do. So I just, because this is recorded, and I'd like to take the opportunity for some points of clarification. I just wanted to make that clear to folks. Learned a lot, actually, so thank you for that. Hopefully we'll be able to post this on your page on the website so that people can see the presentation, which I think is helpful. So thank you.
Mayor.
Thank you.
Oh, Manny, you said you weren't going to speak much more, Manny.
No, but that's funny because Marlene brought out something, and Jaime, and I'm sure Stu are gonna. I brought this. It's interesting. I had brought up that same point about a year and a half ago, in regards to that, in regards to the same thing, in regards to there's Newcastle. And actually, one of our consultants that we have does the same thing for Newcastle. They have a separate board with the chair of the zoning board, the chair of the planning board, the building inspector, the planner sit in there. They review applications, and they pretty much said these applications don't need to go in front of the planning board, or these applications don't need to be in front of the zoning board if they're minor stuff that they have to go. So there are other municipalities that are doing that already. And I have brought up here for our own staff to look into that. Unfortunately, that has not come through fruition right now. So now that I'm seeing that there's a little bit of a different idea coming from the chair of the zoning board, at least I'm not sure how the chair of the planning board will feel, but I would like to explore that again. So, and with that, I'm going to leave it with that. I'm sorry, man. Thank you.
That's all right. We have a long night. We don't always have a long night these days, but this one will be. Marlene, so much appreciate your time and everything else you do for the community. In many other volunteer capacities. So always a pleasure to see you. It's wonderful presentation, and thank you for being here tonight. You too are welcome to stay for as long as you want tonight.
Okay, I'm actually going to stay just to hear Seth, and then I'm going to jump off. Of course,
I'm hoping you would. That I wasn't kidding about that part. I was almost assuming, but you're certainly welcome to stay for the evening. I think Village Manager, we're moving on to the next presentation.
Yes, thank you. So we just heard from Marlene in the Zoning Board of Appeals. So next up is Seth Roy, the Chair of the Planning Board and the Board of Architectural Review. So Seth, welcome.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for having me, and it's good to see everybody. So again, I'm Seth Roy. I've been for the last year the chair of the Architectural Review Board and the Planning Board. It is 2 boards, 1 body. We kind of have 2 distinct roles, but we kind of operate kind of in one space. And we do have a presentation which we will put up. So kind of to start off by drawing a little bit of a contrast to what Marlene was discussing, where the zoning board is an appeals board, where they're kind of looking at appealing decisions that have been made by the building plan examiner. In this case, we're looking to evaluate projects and kind of to determine the degree to which they conform with the current laws. So as opposed to granting variances, we're really looking for conformity. We're looking for projects and making sure that projects work within, just as Marlene described, a very kind of prescribed set of rules and kind of tests that we need to apply to each project. So kind of globally speaking, we are a 7-member board with 1 alternate. Like Marlene's group, we also have 1 alternate open. We actually just had a recent appointment. So it's a kind of a great group that we have right now. We have over the last year. So again, this list is going to be broken out into the applications that have come across the planning board only, the planning board and Board of Architectural Review together, and the Board of Architectural Review only. So starting off with the joint applications over the last year, of 11 applications, we've granted 4 approvals. There's 6 that are still pending and 1 that's been withdrawn. Of the 30 planning board only applications, and we'll get in a little bit later in terms of what the difference of some of these are. But 18 approvals, 6 are still pending, 5 have been withdrawn. Our body also reviewed and made referrals to your board regarding the comprehensive plan. So that was another task that we took on over the course of the last year. And then we reviewed 26 Board of Architectural Review only applications. So we're only looking at BAR components. Again, we'll get into the details of what that really means later in the presentation. And of the 26 that we saw, 24 were approved and 2 were withdrawn. So we can move on to the next slide. So, you know, as a planning board, which we'll start off with those responsibilities. The planning board is looks at projects and looks at a lot of different applications through different lenses. You know, we're not just looking at one component of the code, or what, you know, it's not just the physical plant or the program of a project that might be proposed, but we're looking, we have a handful of different specific roles that we look at different projects for. And the first one that we'll look at here is conditional use, is granting of conditional use. I know in the zoning board can grant use variances. Conditional use is not a variance. That's the zoning code allows for certain uses. It defines them as being conditional under certain circumstances, so that a project cannot, as of right, necessarily have for instance, housing on the ground floor of a building, residential use on the ground floor of a building in a certain district. But that may be a conditional use, which would mean that it's okay for the applicant to have that use if it's reviewed and meets a set of criteria that are laid out in the code by the planning board. So, after a project is noticed, if there's a conditional, there's a project that would like to have a use which is listed as a conditional use in the zoning law, it would then be referred to the planning board, and we would be looking, and this the kind of the phrase here at the start of this, I think you see repeated throughout our review requirements, but on that second bullet, the planning board shall take into consideration and make any necessary modifications to the site plan to ensure the public health, safety, and welfare, the comfort and convenience of the public in general, and of the residents of the immediate neighborhood in particular, and may prescribe such conditions and safeguards as may be required in order to results, in order that the results of its action shall meet a series of objections, which will go on the next sheet. But so in general, we're looking at health and safety. We're looking at how a particular use is going to be fit into the neighborhood, making sure that it's not going to have any adverse impact on the people who use that use, people who live in the immediate neighborhoods. We're looking kind of very locally, but we're also looking at the neighborhood context as well. So the bulleted list here. So what this is the matrix. This is it's almost like a rubric that we apply. I spent 10 years as a middle school teacher. I am currently an architect, but so as a teacher, I remember using a rubric to kind of go through and check off the boxes, and the code I think does serve as an effective rubric. And these are the this is the test that we're applying to projects specifically with regard to conditional use. So we're looking at life safety, emergency services. So in a project that's proposed, making sure that the structures, equipment, that the layout of the site will be conducive to emergency access, and make sure that life safety issues are addressed. Neighborhood context. So putting a use into a certain neighborhood, even if it's a conditional use, making sure that it's appropriate, both in kind of the physical components of it, the size, the character, as well as the quality of that use will be in harmony with the physical neighborhood, the space in which it's being placed. that it's going to be consistent with guiding codes and regulations. So is this project code compliant? Is it compliant with the comprehensive plan? I know Marlene mentioned that a lot. That really kind of comes back to a lot of the questions that we consider. The suitability of utilities, right? So getting water and power and the capacity of the sewer. If you're putting in depending on some uses may be really heavily water dependent, and there's not a large enough sewer main, and it can't be done. So those we get into the nitty gritty of those questions as well. Pollution, environmental issues, both in terms of noise, off gassings, dusts, odors, sun pollution, glare. So we're looking at just the suitability of the property on that particular piece of land, how it fits into that land scale, size, and residential impact, kind of how a particular use would impact the neighborhood, the residential uses in the adjacent area. So these are all of the these are all the criteria that we would need for a project to meet in order to grant a conditional use. So if we go to the next slide, so conditional use is one part of the is one component of the planning board's review. Another major, probably the biggest component of the review of projects that we review is looking at the site plan, looking at a project, whether it's an existing property that's being altered in a certain for a certain purpose, or whether it's a totally new project that's going down on a blank piece of undeveloped piece of land. One of our major roles is to evaluate the site plan and to ensure that whatever is ultimately proposed and approved and permitted is going to, again, meet these criteria, which are clearly laid out in the code, and in order to again to ensure health, safety, and appropriateness in the neighborhood. And specifically, again, this is another bulleted list looking at traffic access, cars coming in and out. There's safety components to that. There's convenience components. There's so making sure that evaluating the traffic access to a particular site. Circulation and parking within the site. So once you're in there, I know parking was a question that was talked about earlier, and the code prescribes how much parking is required in a certain area. Making that evaluation. Again, we're not granting variances. There are times when we're in the process of this evaluation, we all realize that there's a deficiency, and we work with the building inspector to make sure that's referred off to the zoning board of appeals. We're really looking to make sure that what's there, assuming it's compliant with the requirement, with the zoning requirements, kind of functions and works properly, or if a variance has already been granted by the zoning board, we would apply the same evaluation. Landscape and screening, how spaces are separated off. That's another component of the site plan. Trees, bushes, fencing, in order to provide separation, especially from residential areas and commercial uses. Now you can move high. I may. Yep, thanks. So compatibility. So just the scale of signs and lighting. You can imagine that a gas station going up with a big awning and bright lights, and kind of scaling and ensuring that the design that ultimately makes its way through the process is appropriate in terms of being in harmony with the scale of the neighborhood and scale and in the natural environment. Site development. So this is similar to what we were talking about before with a lot of these have analogs in our evaluation of conditional use, but looking at at drainage, utilities, and looking at the way that the site is developed, that kind of the development will stay on site, and that it won't have you won't be having water running off into a neighbor's basement. Those kinds of site issues and site development issues. The village's complete streets policy, which is part of our review, we're, I think in here it kind of summarizes we're seeking to encourage convenience of access and mobility on any sidewalk, street, highway by all users of all ages, abilities, including motorists, pedestrians, bicyclists. So really, ensuring accessibility, safety, as far as kind of access into these sites. That's part of what we're looking at, and the ADA falls under this purview, and these issues are also dealt with within the village comprehensive plan. So that site plan review is a major component. And I think procedurally we spend a lot of our time looking at drawings with developers, with homeowners, with architects, when they're looking at these drawings, and when they're looking at these proposed sites. And our job is to really discuss what we see in these plans, what we feel is conforms with what the code is asking us to, and what conforming with these criteria that we're looking at before, and where we feel it doesn't. Our process and our meetings are really an opportunity for us to ask applicants to go back to the drawing board, and to determine ways, if possible, for that job to conform with these requirements. And that really is kind of overall the nature of a lot of our meetings. So in addition to our site plan review, in addition to conditional use, there are the planning board has a couple of several other kind of one-off responsibilities that we work on as well. It's kind of a catch-all for a lot of different kinds of applications or different kind of determinations that need to be made. We are often assigned as the lead agency in terms of with regard to the SECRA, the State Environmental Quality Review Act, where we're looking at environmental impact of a project. So that's a similar process to some of the others that I discussed. I won't go into the details of it, but rather than a village code determined set of criteria, the criteria in SECRA come from New York State, and this is a responsibility granted to us by the state through the village. Parking waivers, different from a parking variance. This is a component of the village code, which specifies in limited numbers of zoning districts where a project meets a series of criteria, the planning board shall grant a parking waiver. So that is another responsibility that comes up to us occasionally. Affordable housing density bonuses in certain projects, the planning board has responsibility to with regard to granting or making recommendations on those bonuses. Tree permits. So while the permits are granted by the building department, we do make recommendations regarding tree permits as one of our responsibilities. It happens, I think, more often in larger site development projects where there's the number of trees are being taken down as part of that project. And so we would speak to that, and also speak to any kind of mitigation that might be made if a certain number of trees are being taken down. How might those trees be replaced, ideally on that site or elsewhere? So that's a conversation that we get involved with, and that's related to wetlands permits. So while the EAC has a substantial review and advisory role in the wetland permitting process, it is the planning board that ultimately has that final review in terms of granting wetland permits. That's obviously a very new component. That law is relatively new, and it's so that's something that we're working our way through right now as well. And then finally, proposed zoning code changes when they're in front of your board. Our board is responsible for reviewing them and referring them to you with our comments, thoughts, and recommendations. I think that's it. That's it for planning board. So the architectural review board is really, we wear a different hat, and in some municipalities they are different boards. In the village of Ossining, they are one board. So I'll try to move through this pretty quickly, because I know there's a lot going on in here. Like all of the other reviews, are the architectural review process really is guided by a rubric of going to be very overarching, three very basic criteria. We're looking to protect the, environment, protect the value of properties, ensure that what's being built in the village, is going to be. There's actually language I don't think isn't here, but that the excessive uniformity, dissimilarity, inappropriateness of or poor quality of design and the exterior appearance of buildings erected in any neighborhood adversely affects the desirability of the immediate area and neighboring areas for residential, business, for other purposes. Those are those three criteria, and that's from the code that sets up the architectural Board of Architectural Review. So we're looking to avoid excessive similarity. So avoid having a developer put 10 houses up that all look exactly like cookie cutters of one another, which can be off-putting. We're also looking to avoid excessive dissimilarity. So where a structure or building is proposed which is so different and unlike in terms of massing, size, material, height, that from the buildings and its surrounding, that it sticks out. It is kind of can depreciate values of the surrounding properties. And then a third category is really a kind of a catch-all for something that's considered to be inappropriate. And these are, we're really looking to again, within each of these categories, there are a series of criteria. We're not there to judge. We don't like this project. That's not my style. I'd prefer a ranch versus a Tudor. Our criteria is this building going to be offensive? Is it going to be of such poor quality, so incredibly kind of dissimilar, or of unusual materials to the degree that it's going to impair the benefits of occupancy of those properties, impair the stability of the value on both that improved property as well as the adjacent areas. Is it going to prevent appropriate development in that area? So it contribute to the degeneration of property. So it's a bar that's made for us to think very carefully in terms of making sure that project is not going to have a harmful impact architecturally, to the detriment of the surrounding properties. And I think if we go to the next slide, so this is just a really quick summary. Our board, like Marlene's, we're adhering to the limitations of the zoning code, and that's the context in which we review it. As I started off by saying, we're looking to make sure that these projects are conforming with the rules. We're not engineering, we're not designers. We sit in a room with the applicants. We sit on a computer screen these days with the applicants, and we work with them to make sure that the designs that they revise and make and change are being done in a manner that improves the projects to the degree that we feel that they're appropriate for the village, and the term appropriate being defined by these different criteria that we're looking at. And where the board has the flexibility, we can recommend changes to improve the outcome of projects. That's the process that I was just describing. But at the end of the day, our determination is based on that application, and that determination is made within the parameters of the code that are provided, that matrix that I described. So with that, we'll open up to questions.
I'm actually going to suggest that, first of all, I want to thank you for coming and doing this. I don't think I've seen a presentation about this particular group, like in the years that I've been both trustee and then mayor. I don't know if anybody has some major questions. I feel that we are running so far behind in the agenda, and we had already asked Marlene a lot of the questions, that if somebody has something that has to be asked, that's fine. I prefer to sort of move on and ask Seth, same thing from before, that if you have some suggested recommendations going forward, training, the thought about that was brought up about the chairs having some sort of a of a meeting, administrative. It could be run by Stuart or some of the other lawyers to see if that's even doable, allowable, etc. So I thank you for being here. And I hope that next year will continue. And I do think this will also go on the website on your page so that the public has an opportunity to see the presentation and I think learn from it. And I think that's helpful. Does anybody have like a singular something that must be asked tonight? Because we are running really behind on the agenda.
Mayor, for me will be just thank you again for all the hard work, and maybe at some point internally I would like to set up a meeting with the chairs. I'll maybe coordinate something with the village manager and take it from there. I don't have anything else specific for this for right now at least.
Great. Wonderful. I'm looking around. Okay. I thank you on behalf of everyone. Please do send an email to either BOT@Village of Ossining or either the mayor or one of us or all of us with thoughts, comments that you have after this. Maybe you and Marlene might have something together. The goal of these presentations is to learn, it's to educate, it's also to set you up for success. If there's something missing, something we need to do, let us know. I don't mean to cut you off, but it's just that there's so much to talk about. I think any one of these could have been a topic like on their own for an hour, because these are, for many members of our community, like something that they think about when they think about municipal government is exactly these topics. So I appreciate your time, Seth, and thank you for being chair. Karen, I think we're gonna move on. And you as well, Seth, are welcome to stay as long as you want.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank
you, Seth and Marlene. Great presentation. Next, we have our treasurer, Dale Brennan. She's going to be talking about some debt funding for capital projects, as well as some assessment reviews and tax certiorieries. So I turn that over to our treasurer. Thank you.
Hello, Dale.
Good evening. Thank you, Manager DeTore. Good evening, Mayor and the board. First on topic is we would like to bring forward a bond resolution at the legislative meeting next Wednesday, March 2nd. This is for 2 sanitation trucks that were in our capital project plan for 2022. They were budgeted at $600,000 for 2 of them, in receiving a quote from one of our purchasing cooperatives. It's coming in a little higher than that amount at almost 606. So we would like to establish the bond resolution at 610,000 to cover the costs of the 2 sanitation trucks and corresponding bonding costs. I did have a quick convo with our financial advisors just to see where our interest rates are going, and as expected, they have increased a bit. Right now, they're up 60 basis points, which is 1 basis point is 1/100th of a percent. So that's basically 0.60. But that's not surprising. We knew this was going to happen. So we will work to get our bond resolutions in order so that we can go out to bond market and hopefully still take advantage of, they are still relatively low interest rates. When we had done our bonding in September of 2021, we were very fortunate in receiving a short-term interest rate of 0.1817. I am not expecting that this year, but I don't think we're going to be too astronomical, given the rates were so low to start with. So if the board approves, we'd like to bring that forward for the legislative session.
Okay, anybody not approve? Okay, let's move that forward. That percentage rate, it's got to be the lowest in 20 years or something like that.
Yes.
I mean,
def-
that's unbelievable. Okay, good stuff. I mean, take advantage of it. I wish we didn't have to buy so much stuff, but we do.
It keeps the village rolling, that's for sure.
Yep.
Yes. Very, very important to have those trucks. So the next on the agenda, if I could go to the next item. We would like to also bring forward at the legislative session the resolution for our small claims assessment review that are coming forward for our 2022 taxes, which is based on 2021 assessments. This year, we have only 4, which is great, totaling $1,249.61. A lot of it with the scars is timing, not necessarily that less people had put in, but the timing of the assessor's office being able to put these reductions in before the village pulls the file to do their village taxes. So this year, with the timing was on our side so that it did not really affect in terms of bringing down our tax revenues for the year. It brought down our assessment for when we were building the budget, but it's already worked in and we're covered for that. Additionally, we're going to bring forward, Stuart will be doing 2 tax certiorari resolutions. One for Jefferson House Associates and one for NNG Realty. For the 2022 year, we had budgeted $103,000 in tax certiorari refund monies being paid out. This was a little higher than the $97,000 we had budgeted in 2021. But essentially, at the end of the year, for 2021, we had only expended, I believe, hang on one second, 14,972.02. So essentially, the amount that we did not use from last year's budgeted expense will go to fund balance at year end. But this year, I'm seeing as the trend is coming in with us getting served with these, not only for the village, but it's also the town. I see those too. So they are on a trend, I think, of getting a little faster in processing for this year. Any questions?
I do.
Sorry, Maddie, didn't see your hand there.
It's okay. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Dale. I guess one thing that I would like to keep in mind, and obviously to you, Dale, is obviously, as we know, I'm not sure how many of us have followed, but the town of Austin had hired Taylor to do an assessment again. Is a global assessment, very similar to what they did a few years back. So my concern is, and I guess I have 2 questions for you, Dale. After Taylor's assessment that happened a few years back in regards to the taxes, how much of that, what was the difference, I guess, the first year? How much do we have to put into our budget to kind of cover any changes or scars that could potentially come in for us at that point? I don't want to put you in the spot, but just keep that in mind. I think it was a little higher. I think Tom, we went over and said, we may want to budget a little bit higher than we usually because we don't know what's going to happen. And I think we were either almost there or we went over at that time. I cannot recollect that.
Right.
Years back.
Yeah, Yes, in the memo I had completed, I actually did a 11-year review of SCAR refunds. And essentially, the highest point was actually back in 2011 for SCARs, and that was $46,000. And then this year is the lowest, essentially at this point. But again, some of that can also, be the timing of it with the SCARs because of how those work. Tax certs, I think, are a little more representative, essentially in assessment and getting reduced because they follow over, a multi-year pattern, right? A SCAR is a 1 year item, and it's basically, it's residential. So with those, and the timing, it's hard to get a real picture of what's happening. But the tax certs, I think we get a little more of a picture. And so when I did the timeline for those, the highest year of tax certiorari refunds was 2012. And that was at $681,000. 2021, which we were just speaking on, was the lowest year at 14,000. So a big, disparity there. Again, is it timing? Some of it may be because of how they can, or they have to file every year in order to keep their claim, to have the tax cert refund process and go through the court. The timing of the court itself is another item.
Yeah, sometimes
Mhm.
as we've seen is like, one property gets like, I don't want to say a big lump sum, but it's a big number because of the accumulation of the years. It's not just for 1 year, but it's like 3 or 4 years back. That's so no, I understand.
That is correct.
Yeah.
That is
I'm
correct.
just- yeah, I'm just-
And in terms of the reassessment and then the next revaluation, which is, I think it has to be done either every 4 or 5 years that you have to do that process. And then the in-between years are basically kind of a recalibration depending on, and that's neighborhood wide, I believe, although Fernando can give more information on that versus a property by property, right? Which is what we had just experienced in, I think they did it for 2020, which became our 2021 taxes. Yes.
I think that, now again, that also will affect the property value and the taxation at the end of the year for our budget as well. So, I know that there was a little bit of difference between last year's numbers and what, economy wise, what that looked like and what it could be. So again, I know I don't need to tell you that because you're probably 3 steps or 5 steps ahead of me. So, but no, I appreciate that. So, again, if the board wasn't aware of that, just again, the town board passed a resolution, I believe, in regards to that. Taylor will be doing a reassess or reval with the whole town-wise village.
Right, and they do also their annual contract, for their maintenance as well. So, because it's an ongoing, it's a continuous recalibration,
Like Fernando says, we always 100%.
Fernando is correct. Yes.
All right, but I don't have any other questions. Thank you, Dale. Thank you.
Thank you
Great.
so much, Dale. We will
Thank
see
you.
you again, I guess, next week.
Yes. Thank you.
Next up.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Next, back by popular demand, we have Stuart and Lieutenant, I'm sorry, Lieutenant Zimmerman and Damiani here to Damiano.
Yep, lost it.
To talk about towing. I don't know where I cut off there, so apologies.
Yeah, you cut off a little bit. I don't see Officer Zimmer. Oh, there he is.
He's
Got it.
here, so
Yep,
I
see
will
him,
turn
see
it
him.
over to Stuart and et al. Talk about towing.
All right, you're on.
Thank you, Village Manager. You can't imagine how thrilled I am to bring this topic back before the Board of Trustees. I have been waiting for this for this entire meeting. This is here, folks, for a very simple reason, and I had sent you an email about this on Friday. The village clerk and I had a meeting with operators of 4 of the village towing companies back at the end of January. And the village clerk is not here because she's on vacation this week. Chief Sylvester is not here because he's away as well. But I do thank Lieutenant Damiano and Lieutenant Zimmerman for being here. As you know, we spent an awful lot of time, this board did, discussing what is now Local Law 8, which is the towing ordinance. It was actually slightly revised to delay part of the commencement of the law until later this year, that dealing with the zoning issues. Despite all of that, and despite the public hearings and the outreach, it was not until after the law was on the books, and in fact, on the books for more than 3 weeks, that the clerk was contacted by a number of the towing companies about problems that they had with the local law. I should point out that to date, no tow company has yet registered with the village clerk as required by Local Law 8. So we have a situation that we have a local law that took a great deal of work by this board to put together that so far there is zero compliance with. It's the only way to say it. The tow operators did present a number of issues with regard to the local law, some of which I think can fairly easily be dealt with. There were some issues relating to inspections. They had a question about inspection of facilities as to whether there is a fee for that, which is something that can be checked with the building inspector. They had an issue with regard to insurance requirements, basically saying that some of the insurance requirements that are in the code, they simply can't meet, that there is no such insurance for some of the things that are being requested. I should point out that those insurance requirements actually are seen in other municipalities, so I'm not entirely certain about that. The operators objected to having their drivers fingerprinted. Their argument is that unlike taxi drivers, tow truck operators don't, transport people, they're transporting tow trucks. So why is there a need for that? Their phrase was that they're towing metal, not people. There was an objection to the fees for registering the tow trucks. I believe the fee is now $350 per tow truck. The comparison wasn't in peak scale. It's $250 for the first vehicle and $100 for each additional vehicle. They also had objections to the storage fees and issues like that. Again, I do want to point out these were issues that were raised by the operators who were at these meetings. As this board will recall, there was a lot of discussion about the fees, and we didn't hear from the tow truck operators. Finally, the tow truck operators indicated that they were concerned about the 30-minute window to respond, and if they did not respond, that they would be dropped to the bottom of the list. Their argument was that in bad weather, it may be difficult for them to so respond. They left the meeting by saying that they're all local companies. They have good relationships with the Ossining Police Department. I wanted to bring this to you tonight, even though the clerk, as I said, is away and the chief is away. But again, we do have the 2 lieutenants here who I think can hopefully talk a little bit as to what has happened since January 1st. We have had a couple of snowstorms where tow trucks have been needed. I can let the board know that I have received a call from one property owner who was concerned because he didn't understand how he was being charged. He in fact felt that the charge was inconsistent with what the board had passed for 2022. And so we have what I think is a very problematic situation. I have tow truck operators who are unwilling to register, and yet we need to have tow truck operators who will tow the vehicles that are requested by the village. I think that while there may be some tweaks that are needed to the local law, not having them registered is simply not an acceptable situation. Simple as that. One of the reasons this was done was to provide, number one, greater transparency, but greater responsibility on behalf of the tow operators. I think the tow operators, to be blunt, frankly, prefer the status quo, but there was a reason why that the local law was changed. So I do know that the clerk wanted to talk to the board about this, hopefully at the next work session, which I think is scheduled for March the 9th. I did want to bring this before the board promptly to make them aware. Lieutenant Stamiano and/or Zimmerman, I'm assuming and I believe that we are basically back to what the situation was prior to January 1 in terms of how the tow truck system is working. We just, they're called, they come in, and they're charging fees. One of the issues that has come up is, are they charging fees based upon what was charged in 2021? Or are they charge fees that are based on 2022? Because to be blunt, if I can just say this, I don't think they should be able to essentially pick and choose what part of the local or current law they want to use and what part they don't want to use to their benefit or not benefit. So, if, either of the lieutenants, maybe they can just sort of fill in the board as to really where we are right now on the ground with regard to how the system's operating.
Well, I can tell you, we have really no idea how much they charge unless there's a problem. And they've circumvented that fee charge with, open gate at night is additional fee because we've never adjusted these fees for 10 years. And now you address the fees and you adjusted them, but they don't want to go along with the other portions of what you request. So we really don't know unless somebody comes in and complains.
And I can just say, and thank you, Lieutenant, the complaint that I personally received was from an individual who, one, told me the fee that he was quoted by one of the operators under either the 2021 or 2022 fee, it was too high. Then the tow operator lowered the fee and the person offered to pay by credit card, which, as this board knows, was part of the 2022 law. And that individual tow truck operator said, well, first I won't take credit card, then I'll take a credit card for part of it. So this individual was not pleased, to put it mildly. So, I echo what the lieutenant is saying, is that I think we have a circumstance where there is a local law, there is a local law on the books, and if we circumventing is probably a good word for it. I mean, at this point, we need cars towed. It's happening, but it's not happening in accord with the law that we have here now. And I just think overall that's a problem under any circumstance.
So Stuart,
Sure, Lieutenant.
just so I understand clearly, the new ordinance was put into effect Jan 1, and since then, none of the tow companies have complied?
That is correct. The only part that was delayed till June was with regard to the requirement that they have gated facilities and, those requirements, because we figured that would take a little while. But
Right.
My understanding from Clerk Donnelly is that none of the operators have signed up.
Okay. Yeah, I read through the bullet points that you'd sent out about, them having concerns with the inspection fee to then inspect the improvements that needed to be made. Excuse me. I guess there was some discussion about a $500 fee that the village building department charges for an on-site inspection of, I guess, the gate and the tow facilities, the yards.
Right. I think, thank you, Lieutenant. I think, folks, what the objection or the issue raised by some of the tow operators was that the building department charges $500, what they said, to conduct an inspection. I know that there is a fee for an operating permit, and I believe that the board had changed the fee structure that if you got essentially if you were inspected the first time, it wouldn't be a fee, but it was basically on sort of like you were given 2 shots at it, but if the third time you didn't do it, you'd be charged $500. So I don't think it was an automatic 500.
Okay, so it wasn't an initial show up, but if you couldn't comply, third strike, you're out.
That's basically what it was. That's what this board had changed in the fee schedule. So I think that was a misunderstanding with them, and I can certainly clarify that with the building inspector. As I said, there was an issue with regard to insurance. Again, the point that was made by the operators was they couldn't get some of it. Yeah, what they said that, well, what the insurance was with regard to, they said there is state statutory coverage, but that they do not have umbrella coverage because apparently none of their brokers can get them umbrella coverage. Again, I know from looking at the legislation in other municipalities, there is umbrella coverage. Now, let me just be fair. That's again what the legislation says. Whether these tow operators in these other municipalities have similar difficulties in getting umbrella coverage, that I can't answer. That would be something I'd have to actually, call up the individual municipalities that are there. But bluntly, tweaking the insurance coverage, if the board thinks that that's something that could be done, needs to be done, it can be done. Frankly, it can be done on an interim basis just to get this. They did, Lieutenant Zimmerman, as I said, they had a fingerprinted, they objected to fingerprinting. They didn't want their drivers fingerprinted. They didn't see why that should be done.
Other than the claim of not transporting people, transporting cars as a reason, did they name another reason for it? Was it the cost involved? Was it something else that
they didn't cite to the cost? I suspect that has something to do with it, but what it was, because I in fact said, well, we require taxi drivers, and they simply that was the response back was, we don't, we tow metal, we don't basically transport people. So they didn't see any reason to have their their operators fingerprinted.
Well, they said rarely.
Yeah. That's true. They didn't. That's you're right, Lieutenant Damiano. They did not say
rarely.
universal.
So it's about a sex offender, transporting somebody at 3 a.m. in the morning. That's what it's about.
Gotcha.
I mean, I guess another issue that could be brought up is, I know they're only transporting, property, but they are transporting property. I mean, not all cars that are towed are total losses. Right. Some are disabled, some have been in minor accidents, they're just not drivable. I know operators try to do their best, as the car operators, not the tow truck operators, the drivers of the vehicles being towed, typically they'll do their best to remove valuables from the cars. And I'm not insinuating that tow truck drivers are committing larcenies from vehicles, but we have taken complaints that people have said, hey, listen, whatever was in my car, and now it's not when I go to pick it up.
Right.
I mean,
so
also that goes to the gated lot issue, right, which a lot of these tow companies in the past, some of them didn't have a gated or closed in facility where they could be subject to anybody walking by. And we've had people go and get their own car back out with a spare key.
Right.
And then,
if I can interject, I want to go back to why we're doing all of this, and it's taken hours and hours of labor, but there were 3 key issues why we looked at tow trucks. 1, complaints from community members who said that they were being randomly and arbitrarily charged. And because they didn't know what the actual charges were supposed to be, they felt they were getting ripped off. Because when they asked for a price list, there wasn't one anywhere. And a lot of it happens, you know, like you're visiting someone, you're leaving at 2 a.m. I don't know, whatever. The things happened, but there's no price list. So that's one of the reasons we started looking at the towing trucks, right? Came from consumers. 2, people of color said that there was discrimination. They believed in how they were being charged, and they called some trustees to what others. It's hard to tell where that lies because I'm not quite sure how anybody compares anything since there's no price list to begin with, but it's a complaint. It's a, you know, like, how does anybody even know if discrimination is occurring when nobody knows what anybody's actually charging? People weren't getting receipts. Where do you go? How do you know? So it started a consumer. That's 1. 2, once we started with the consumer end, we were informed, I believe, the chief, I believe others, that, by the way, the towing companies have been working with us for a while. And by the way, they haven't had an increase in the fees in, I think we were told, upwards of 10 years. We should do something in favor of the towing companies, not to harm towing companies, but because there has to be some fair, equitable adjustment to them. And thirdly, that the businesses, that the towing companies started calling a couple of us and said, hey, you know, in other communities, you know, they do this, that, and the other thing, and we don't get a fair shake. So it came consumer to, hey, let's get some fair pricing across the board so everybody's on the same playing field, to, hey, we all want to get treated fairly. Some people get preferential treatment by the police when they call tow truck. All of this to say, the purpose of all this is from some equitable behavior, compliance, where everybody plays in the same field on the same level, to favor consumer, police, tow companies. And what we're having a discussion about now is failure of the towing companies who make a living, right? This is a for-profit business off of this business, who are not complying with all of this work that has been done for those 3 keys. So I'm sort of like a little bit taken aback by where we're sitting here today, because, you know, if we mistakenly thought that we're charging them too much, the purpose was to help their businesses, because we were told they haven't had an increase. It wasn't to punish anybody, and it certainly wasn't so the village could make another, you know, $200 on its balance sheet at the end of the year.
Well,
I mean, we spent more than that on lawyers at this point. So
right. I mean, that's the thing.
why
I mean,
are we here? Like, how did we get to this?
I don't know.
Oh, I'm not asking you, Officer Zimmerman. That wasn't the point. That was a
No,
rhetorical
I
question.
get that. I mean, it is. It's an interesting dynamic because you have 3 interested parties that are all part of the village dynamic. I mean, you have local businesses that are local businesses. Every one of the tow companies that we're talking about are not from out of town. They're all local people. They're all local businesses, and the majority of the towing that they're doing are local residents. So 1, it has to be equitable and fair to the businessman and also the consumer that is on the other end of that. And then, you know, dealing, I guess, with any legal issues in between, you know, some of that will probably fall on our lap. But back to the other point that no one has, you know, complied with this new legislation or these new, you know, ordinances that have come down. I mean, what is the village prepared to take the next step as far as that's concerned? Or are we just going to give a stay of execution here?
Right. So it's an ironic problem to have of no good deed goes unpunished. So this is being brought to our attention, Stuart. What is the outcome of, like, what are we supposed to be doing with this information today? Since I wasn't aware of this, I don't know if others were, but it's good that now we're aware of it, because again, the goal was that all ships rise, not that ships battle each other. I do think the issue that consumers had a feeling that they were not being charged equitably seems to actually have some merit if people are being told, like, you know, pay this, and if you're paying cash, you pay that, and I don't take it, and all of that is not appropriate business behavior in this day and age. Putting that aside, I don't think that's the biggest problem here. We're being asked to do what exactly? Are you presenting that a problem to the board that we need to think about, or the police officers coming up with some ideas? Or
Mayor, I wanted the board to be aware of it
Okay.
We don't have many laws that the board passes that essentially, just to be blunt, get ignored.
Mhm.
I mean, literally. I mean, and I pointed out at the beginning, it's not as if there was no reach out to the
I
tow
know.
operators.
I know.
I should also point out, they were advised by me and by the clerk's office on many occasions before January 1. Here's the application. Here's what you're going to need to do. Here's how you do it. And, you know, days, and nothing happened. I think, you know, while I understand that there may be some tweaks needed with regard to issues like insurance potentially and things like that, I think a lot of what what is being suggested here, I mean, let me say it this way. They need to register under the law. It's as simple as that. That's what they have to do. They have to be registered. They have to proceed. I think the fingerprinting requirement, I think, should be there. The board had an ample discussion about what the fees should be, both fees for the operator and fees that they should receive both for towing and for storage. There was an objection by some of the folks at this meeting that instead of that, while the village did raise the storage fee, they basically, if the board will remember, gave the first 24 hours as a grace period. And there was, objection from the tow operators. But again, that's something that the board, if it chooses, can revisit, frankly, at the end of the year when they do the fee schedule, or if they want to do it another time. I think it's just imperative that these tow operators register. What happens if they don't? I think that's a matter that we will have to all discuss and have to discuss internally, and I'll have to discuss it with the chief or the lieutenants to see what happens next. But the simple fact of the matter is, this is what the law is. They have to register. I mean, that's all. I mean, and because by registering, then we deal with the fee schedule that exists. They have to accept the credit card payments, and things follow. They have a consumer bill of rights they're supposed to provide, one which has already been provided to them both in English and in Spanish. It's not even that they have to prepare it. It's been done. So all of this is there. We just have tow operators who are enjoying the status quo, and frankly, they don't want things to change. But the truth of the matter is, it has changed, and I think they simply have to be told at this point, you got to register, and that's it. That's my own personal point of view. I don't think that waiting for changes that they would like to see in the law is not the way to go about this. The law is there. If the law has to be changed, through some incremental effects, through another local law, so be it. But to just not register, that's not the way to do things.
Right. And so and we're going to move on because I think you're bringing this to our attention. I don't think we can solve it in the moment. I just want to hear from the officers since you're here with us. The tow companies are called by the police department, generally speaking.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
And what if you were in a town where there are no towing companies in your municipality? What would you do?
There's a lot of county ones, Glenn's, Mark's Towing. They have all different ones on throughways, some certain highways those highways have the contracts.
And some of our local tows tow from the municipalities as well.
So other municipality tow trucks can tow in Ossining?
Not currently.
Not currently, no.
Oh, interesting.
Well, not that we call for.
That's the important thing, Mayor. This only relates to tows that are requested by the police.
Yeah.
Yes, I know. I want
right.
I understand that, but I want anybody hearing this and seeing this to understand that this is a for-profit business which is given to local tow companies by the police department in Ossining, and they call only local.
Right.
And that we've been working on this for a year based on consumer complaints about how consumers are treated. That's how this started. And in that process, we were asked to make sure that we increase prices to benefit the local tow businesses. I get a feeling something is lost in that translation, but I want to remind everybody that was actually the whole idea here. This, the behavior part that you're describing, something we're going to look at, because there are other options, I think. Not one, which is ridiculous, because the whole idea was to actually make this better for the tow companies, as long as consumers were treated respectfully and equitably. And that doesn't seem to be the case, actually, because I've seen zero improvement being proven on that level. If you don't have price lists and you're not registered, and you ask people, tell people you don't take credit cards in the 21st century, not to take credit cards. I mean, there are companies now that won't take cash. So people carry credit cards and debit cards and you know, iPhones with their wallets. I mean, this is counterproductive to consumers.
If I could say one thing, Mayor,
Please, sir.
there's only really two companies that are tow companies, and that's A&P and Bob's. Bob's is strictly a tow company. The other ones, Nolan's, Capello's, Montague's, they're an auto body shop that likes to tow here and there. So like Nolan's and Montague's, they maybe take 100 tows a year, as opposed to Bob and A&P, they take 200. Capello's took 7 last year. So for asking for Capello's to go through all this, he's not going to do it. Montague's for 50 or 60
they took
tows.
themselves off, Rich.
No.
I think Capello's took themselves out of the running.
Oh,
for
okay.
it.
I'm sorry.
Okay, I just did this for 2021. They towed
Right.
7. So I think there needs to be some tweaking with, you know, are they going to $500 fee, you know, for a Montague's or Nolan's? That's probably a lot. It's not a lot for Bob's or A&P because they're towing constantly. You know, and if their DOT trucks are approved, who are we to say that they're not approved? And I don't think anybody in my department is going to be better than the DOT to inspect their trucks.
Okay, so Lieutenant, do me a favor, just email me those numbers, or if the rest of the board wants, I just want to do the math on that. So thank you, gentlemen, for being here. If there's anything else you think of, can you just email BOT@Village? Like if you walk out of this and say, oh man, we should have talked about X, Y, and Z. I do appreciate the commentary about the fees. You do understand the irony of us trying to make things better, and this now, you know, the way it's played out is not exactly the intention of the board, but I think we're going to have to look at this. Not happy about the outcomes. Does anybody have anything else to add before we go on to the next agenda item? I'm looking at the gallery, not seeing. Am I seeing? No, that's a no. Oh,
no.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Manny.
No, I'm just gonna say that, no, thank you. And Stuart, I know your frustration, and it's not just a year, it's actually over 5 years when Lieutenant Damiano brought this toll law in front of us. So we've been dealing with this for a few years now. And it's just kind of disappointing to see that now we're getting some comments back. So I'm just looking forward to sort of like have a resolution at some point, but we'll go from that, Stuart. I do totally understand that.
Okay, yeah. All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Lieutenants. Next, Stuart is going to discuss, actually, I have Lieutenant Damiano still staying here. I guess Lieutenant Zimmerman too, I don't know, but
You're welcome to stay.
to review a cabaret license for application for 3 Westerly.
Thank you, folks. We do have an application from 3 Westerly for a cabaret license. Just to point out, the times that they have asked for are Monday through Sunday, so all days, noon. It says noon till 3 a.m., but they actually have normal hours of operation is noon to 2 a.m. And it would be entertainment, restaurant, and live music. There was a next to the application, which I sent to you folks, the blotter log report over since 2019 provided by OPD. And as Trustee White pointed out, many of those calls appear to actually be for the apartment building, not the restaurant, which I think share the same street address of 3 Westerly. So if you sort of look through this, you'll see a lot of them actually have apartment numbers here with regard to that. So that's everything that is with regard to that. They were issued a cabaret license last year, and they did successfully pass their building inspection for this year. So if the board has any questions, either of me or the folks from OPD who are here, we're certainly here to answer. But I did want to point out the time frame that they are looking for, which is beyond what the board has recently approved for other locations in the village.
Right, so I'm going to ask the officers, any issues with this address, with this business?
For me, I have no objection for them receiving a cabaret license.
Okay, so
No, Corporation Counsel Kahan's right. The establishment and the apartment building have an address and a name that's one and the same. The majority of the calls for service are in fact at the apartment buildings. Not to say that the restaurant doesn't have calls for service, but not nearly the same magnitude as, a residential facility with multiple apartments. So, and it's not a big deal.
okay, and Stuart, it is out of the boundaries of what we're approving for everybody else in the sake of equity across all of the establishments. I don't see any reason to treat them any differently. So we have a 1 a.m.
Well, 1 a.m. would be for a Friday night and Saturday night, and then it would be midnight Sunday through Thursday.
Yeah, that's what I would be okay with, as I would with everybody else. Same playing field. Is there anybody that sees it differently? Am I missing something?
I think they should adhere to what we've set in place. And again, with that caveat that if there is a special event,
Right,
that they would email the manager and she would deal with it.
I will concur with that, Mayor.
everybody else okay?
Yep.
All
We'll
right,
have a resolution for that next week, Mayor.
and they should be so informed. Okay,
Mayor, and I just have a quick question, I guess, for the lieutenants, just OPD in general on this kind of cases for the blotters, because this is not, we get this whenever an establishment comes and asks for a cabaret license. And this is, we know this and we ask this, but is there a way to filter this out to future blotter details that they can come in front of us? Because sometimes that we see not just 2 pages, but we see several pages on this. And sometimes they're, like you said, this parts of the residential, or because they happen across the street, but they need an address, so they put the closest address on that one. So a lot of the stuff, may not pretend to that particular business that we are looking into. Is there a way to filter this out by events, by address? Is there something that you guys could do to establish that to help us a little bit sometimes?
Yeah, I'm just looking to see right now if there's a different, 3 Westerly Road. Yeah, a lot of times if it's a report is entered by its physical address, not the name of the establishment, sometimes that may generate a, I don't want to say redundant or duplicate, but if you're looking for something at 84 Croton Avenue, are you looking for the apartments above 84 Croton Avenue with an apartment attached to it, or are you looking for the restaurant that's below the apartments?
Yeah.
So that could be something that can be sorted out.
Yeah, that'll be helpful, because again, there's times that we get blotters and it's very lengthy, and then sometimes they're not relevant to the case that we're seeing in this case for a cabaret license or an establishment. Not that we don't want to see what happened on the upper floors or anything like that, but what is in front of us is not that. So
Yeah.
if there's a way to filter, at least for me,
The next time they build a bar in an apartment building on the waterfront, we'll do 1, 3, 1, 5. And that'll be good.
a 3.5, we can do a
Yeah.
3.5. Yeah. You're right. Thank you, Lieutenant.
No problem.
Thank you, guys.
okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you both. I believe you are officially excused now, but we only have one more item and it's an exciting one. So next up, as a continuation of our discussion from last week, Maddie Zahach, Assistant Village Manager, will be presenting a prezi on or in lieu of parking fund recommendation for downtown.
Thank you, Karen. Good evening, Mayor, members of the board. We introduced this topic last week under new business at the legislative meeting. The manager and I had provided a memo as well as some documentation prepared by the Corporation Counsel's office to sort of look at some examples of what we're calling an ILF, an in lieu fund. So for those who were not around last week, an in lieu fund is something that communities all over the country, all over the world, I'm sure, use in order to solve, parking problems in highly trafficked areas, which is obviously something that we've been dealing with, particularly in downtown. This is something that Nelson Nygaard suggested that we approach as one of our primary steps to sort of ease the parking in downtown. And so I am going to show a prezi. Unfortunately, I didn't get this to the board before, but there is no new material here. This is everything from the memo that you received last week, just in a visual format. And I am going to ask Corporation Counsel, as well as Karen and Jaime, to shout and assist me because I'm not going to be able to see someone raising their hand on the screen. Am I frozen?
You're frozen.
Nothing coming out. Yeah, frozen, Maddie. Nothing's going.
Just the screen, but can you hear me?
I can hear you, but there's
I
nothing
see
showing
a
up.
black screen that says recording on my end.
You see an accordion?
It just has that you have started your screen sharing. Do you want to send it to me and then I can run it?
I can't.
And you're frozen. Your face is frozen.
Yeah, no, I'm frozen. I can't get out of the screen that I'm in. I apologize.
Okay. Because I can grab it back if you want to just separately send it to me in an email.
Yeah, I have it. Maddie, is it the one that you sent out earlier today?
Yes. I can't make any changes on my screen at all, so I'm not going to be able to see it even if someone else pulls it up.
Okay.
Okay. Plan 2. Jaime, if you could pull it up on your screen, if you don't mind terribly, and I will log into Zoom from my phone.
Will do.
Thank you.
I'm trying to end the screen share that's going on right now. Somebody has to stop that. So whoever's the host, if you could stop the sharing.
I am trying. Won't let me.
Are you able to make me the host?
Hold on. It looks like it needs to let me share first before it does it. Okay, so. Okay, it still says Maddie sharing.
All right, listen, I'm looking at, is this something that can wait one more week so we can move on? We have a long exec, or is there a time is of the essence to have? And it's not because you can't get this going. It's just giving me sort of a few minutes break to think through, our evening. Is this something that we have to resolve tonight? Is there a time is of the essence issue here?
We can we can move it. We're just trying to, we'll shift it around. I think it's okay because I think if Maddie can't present it, it really doesn't, I don't know that we have another choice anyway.
Well, but
Maddie,
she could talk it through if it has a time of the essence issue
do you mind postponing this, or are you able to get it up?
I have it here. I've got it up, so I can share now. It's really up to you.
Maddie's frozen again.
Wait, can you see me on my phone?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And now
Okay,
Jaime
cool.
is starting to share. Okay.
Okay.
Can you see it on the screen, Matt?
I can. It's going to be teeny tiny, so you'll have to bear with me. I'm restarting my computer. I sat here so patiently with it all queued up too. It's just Murphy's Law. Okay, so thanks everybody for your patience. This is something, as I mentioned, we discussed last week.
Jaime, could you please click on goals and objectives?
Maddie,
Maddie, you're frozen.
Maddie, you're freezing again, so I think we're gonna have to like postpone this.
Yeah, no worries.
You're freezing again.
Okay, I'm on my phone. I wish I could do something different. I don't know what else to do. So
No, that's okay. I
No,
mean,
it's
I
okay.
think we can do it next week.
Yeah, I think we'll start maybe, you know, we've got it. We'll start with it so we can get through it. No, we'll just shift it around.
Maybe, since we didn't have a chance to look at it before, you could send it to us and we can look at it so that we'll be ready.
sure, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank
Sorry
you.
again.
We do hear you though, so that's good. Okay. I think that's it for tonight. Yes. Karen, I can't hear you.
Yes, that concludes tonight's episode.
Episode. I like that. Sense of
So,
humor at
yes.
the end of a day.
To be continued.
Okay.
Is that what it is?
May we
All
have a
right,
motion
folks.
to
We'll be
adjourn
back.
to-
That was a little cliffhanger that we left for you there. You got the
Yeah.
beginning of the in lieu of parking thing, but
Yes, now we're all excited.
yeah,
It's a trailer.
So you're gonna have
Okay.
to tune in next week.
And Stuart
May we have a
was,
motion to move to executive session for matters of real property, litigation, and personnel?
Second.
All those in favor?
aye.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, have a good night.